Today on Fear and Greed, some of Australia's biggest companies are in the firing line after Donald Trump imposes across-the-board 25% tariffs on metal products. JB HiFi posts a strong profit but a share price tumbles, and more bad news for WiseTech Global with new allegations against founder Richard White, plus profits from Ansell and carsales, and the last word on the Super Bowl. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Tuesday, the 11th of February 2025. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Morning, Michael. Love earnings season. We're up and running.
Oh yeah, there is so much in today's show. The main story this morning, Sean, is a massive one. Australian steel and aluminium exports to the United States could be hit by tariffs after US President Donald Trump announced a 25% impost on metal imports from all countries.
All countries. It was flagged a couple of weeks ago and confirmed over the last 36 hours, though Donald Trump didn't say when it would come into effect. Now, combined, Australia sells about $1 billion or a bit over $1 billion worth of steel and aluminium products to the US. This has happened before. In fact, Malcolm Turnbull, when Prime Minister, negotiated an exemption for Aussie metal exports when Donald Trump was in power previously. This is Trump administration 1. He negotiated that on the back of Australia having a trade surplus with the US. Yesterday, Mr. Turnbull was quick to come out and say, well, Anthony Albanese needs to negotiate a deal with Donald Trump and do it quickly. Back then, Canada, Mexico, the EU, they all won exemptions. Now, Donald Trump doesn't seem to be in the mood to give too many exemptions at the moment because those three economies, Canada, Mexico and the EU, have all been threatened with tariffs. So whether or not Australia gets off the hook this time is problematic. Mr. Albanese said he has scheduled a discussion with Donald Trump about the tariffs. He said he will keep everyone up to date on the outcome of that call. I look forward to it. Really, it's a bit of a litmus test for the federal government. It's the first time where Donald Trump has said something that's directly affected some of our companies. And so how Don Farrell, the trade minister, Anthony Albanese, Kevin Rudd, who's our ambassador in the US, how they respond to this is actually fairly important because it's their first real test.
Yeah, and I know that there was a little bit of hope that maybe the AUKUS pacts and the various defence treaties might be enough to kind of give Australia that exemption. But the thing is, there are so many big questions for companies involved in this space. And you've told us so many times now, Sean, that the business hates uncertainty. So how did this affect the local metal manufacturers and also then the next stage kind of back along the line, the iron ore miners that provide the raw material for steel?
So it depended very much on where they have factories. The share price of Australia's biggest steel maker, BlueScope, you'd expect that would fall. Well, it actually jumped, because investors bet that it would actually be a net beneficiary of US steel tariffs. That's because BlueScope has spent $5 billion in the US and built factories in Ohio. It generates more than half its profits from its North American operations. They're the sorts of things that Donald Trump loves to hear. So that might actually do okay. Bisalloy Steel, it produces here and in China. Its share price fell fairly quickly. Aluminium smelterers, people who smelter aluminium in Australia, Rio Alcoa, well, they're a bit mixed. Rio share prices ended lower. Alcoa was flat. Hard to see, until we actually see the detail and how it's going to affect them, it's hard to trade on it. Your point about the iron ore miners is really important. So our big iron ore miners, BHP, Fortescue Metals and Rio, they sell a lot of the stuff to China to make steel. The good news from that front is that China doesn't really sell much steel to the US. It actually uses most of it itself. So as a result, it's unlikely to lessen demand, at least as a first effect, because most of the steel is being used in China. Now, of course, if it causes a global slowdown, these tariffs, then it will affect us because China won't want as much iron ore for their own steel. But the immediate effect isn't great.
Yeah. Big story, that one, and obviously a lot of pressure on that phone call between Anthony Albanese and Donald Trump. And it's one of those stories, Sean, that could just evolve very, very quickly, couldn't it?
Yeah. If you're listening to this early in the morning, Tune in for the afternoon edition because anything could have happened by then.
Indeed. All right, let's talk about profit season, Sean. It kicks off properly this week, and JB HiFi was the first big name to report. It posted a big jump in sales, a decent rise in earnings for the second half of 2024, setting a pretty high bar for other retailers who are reporting profits in coming weeks.
Yet it was sold off. This is a great little story, this one. JB is a market darling. Retails everything from fridges to computers. They own Good Guys. Revenue up 10%, profit up 8%. The result from Good Guys, which has been a bit of a laggard, also beat expectations. All pretty good. And initially, share price went up. Chief Executive Officer Terry Smart said strong sales had continued into January. Okay. However, he was somewhat cautious. Now, he talked about the December quarter being particularly good thanks to Black Friday and Boxing Day sales, but just cautious about what's going on in the market right now. What happens? The share price tumbles. JB HiFi, like Commonwealth Bank and a bunch of others, has been priced to perfection. We keep talking about this idea where all the good news is priced in. So even just a tiny bit of caution was enough to sell it off yesterday. And that's what we might be seeing the whole time or throughout this earnings season, these price perfection stocks being sold off if there's any caution. JB is big. It means 225 stores in Australia and New Zealand. It had same stores sales growth of 7% or so, but the market wants it to be great, not just good. And that's not quite what they got yesterday.
This is exactly what you said was going to happen. You mentioned this, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, about this risk of everything being priced to perfection, and even just a little bit of caution might be enough to knock investors' confidence. I'm going to start calling you. Is Nostradamus too old school? We need a new kind of name for it.
Probably 1,000 other people calling it as well, but I'm happy to go with it. What I did like, I've got to tell you about this result though, Michael.
Yeah.
One of the things where sales are booming, robotic vacuums.
Do you have one?
No, I don't. Do you?
No, I don't.
I love one, though.
Okay. They look awesome.
They do. Very cool.
But as soon as you have a step or stairs or something, it looks like it would be problematic. What I want though is to be able to. Have you seen the videos then online, Sean, of the robotic vacuums, and you can train your cat to sit on the back?
Oh, really?
and if you have two of these robotic vacuums and two of these trained cats, you can in fact pretty much have battles between the two of them.
Oh dear. Moving on.
Anyway, it's a very serious show today, Sean. I don't know kind of how we got onto robotic vacuum cat battles. That was JB. What about the rest of the market? Was the ASX knocked around much by the Trump tariff announcement?
All things considered, it wasn't a bad day. The tariff announcement, week leading from Wall Street. The market initially fell pretty sharply, then it rebounded, ended down just 0.3%. Most of the market is focused on earnings. A couple of notables yesterday. Star Entertainment Group rose 14% after it said it would not accept an offer from a Chinese consortium to take over its 50% stake in debt in the Queen's Wharf complex in Brisbane. And Main Pharma Group jumped more than 20% at one point after the company forecast a big rise in pre-tax earnings thanks to strong growth in its women's health range. There you go. And
just briefly, Sean, international markets.
All about tariffs help push up the US dollar, which hurt the Aussie dollar. It's about 62.5 US cents at the moment. What it did do, though, it's also pushed up gold. The whole idea of these tariffs coming in or not creates uncertainty. People flee for safe assets, gold being almost the safest of the lot. So it's trading near a record high.
Sean, you've got a great interview coming up after the show. You are speaking today with Chris Bryke from StockSpot.
All about gold. So what we're just talking about then, we talk to Chris and get an in-depth look at why gold is considered such an important asset right now. What I didn't realize, some super funds, for example, don't really buy gold. They don't think it's an important asset to have in your portfolio. And Chris tells us why he thinks it is and why they think it might not be. So it's a great look at gold.
Okay. It is a good conversation. It's coming up after the show. We said at the beginning, Sean, that it was a big day, that we have a lot to cover. And we're talking car sales. We're talking more bad news for WiseTech Global. We're talking about more companies ordering staff back to the office. And then some companies that are really having to crack down on the people who are coming into the office and then just disappearing again after an hour or so. Some great stories coming up. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, medical gloves and surgical gown manufacturer Ansell plans to lift prices to offset the impact of the tariffs imposed by the US government and shift some manufacturing out of China to spread its production more evenly.
So we know now that imports into the US will attract a 10% tariff that hits Ansell. What they're talking about doing is lifting prices elsewhere where they're selling not just to the US but to other places, and also moving away, their production facilities moving away from the reliance on China. So they've already shifted into Sri Lanka, for example. Overall, Ansell reported a big jump in half-year profit and said the oversupply of many of the products that it produces of the last couple of years is ending. Now, medical gloves and surgical gowns, absolute COVID darling. Couldn't get enough of them. Problem is that when COVID finished, there was huge amounts of these products in the marketplace. So Ansell has really struggled since then. It has settled down somewhat, and the commentary yesterday from this company, which is huge, it's got 14 factories in 9 countries, it's got 16,000 people, but the commentary really reassured investors that glut of supply is over. So its share price jumped 8% yesterday. It's actually up more than 40% since August last year.
Car sales share price fell 7% yesterday, Sean, after it reported slightly disappointing earnings and said demand for second-hand electric vehicles had dropped.
This is where it's really interesting. So demand for second-hand vehicles generally is okay, but falling prices of new EVs, particularly Teslas, is hurting the second-hand market for EVs. Kind of makes sense. Cameron McIntyre, CEO of carsales, was talking about this. Last year, he pointed out that Tesla cut prices on the Model Y. Now, last month, we know that BYD, which is the other big player in EVs in this country, said it would soon sell the first sub-30,000 EV in Australia. So when a new car is costing a lot less, that doesn't do much for resale values. Carsales also said it's delaying price increases in the US, which is its second biggest market. Investors weren't happy about downgrading the full-year US revenue outlook from good to solid, and the company's share price tumbled.
Sean, the corporate watchdog. It's been a little while since we've had a Star Entertainment story.
Well, we had one about 3 minutes ago, but other than that, it's been days.
Yeah, well, it's been a week since we actually had a proper one. Okay,
True.
God, goodness me, you're a pedant sometimes. Yes, 3 minutes ago, fine, but honestly, the corporate watchdog has accused the former leadership of Star Entertainment of putting profitability ahead of risk and misleading a major lender.
The Australian Securities and Investments Commission is suing 10 former executives and directors of Star Entertainment, including former CEO Matt Bekier and former chair John O'Neill, for alleged breaches of their directors' duties. ASIC alleges that the group didn't pay enough attention to the risks of money laundering and the infiltration of the casino by criminal organisations. All that has emerged since those two gentlemen left those jobs. ASIC began civil proceedings against 11 directors, not 10. Now it's come to an agreement with one of them, so it's down to 10. The actual proceedings were delayed for a couple of years, back on again. What's really interesting in this, the case against Star will test the boundaries of knowledge of wrongdoing and whether the knowledge puts a director in breach of their duties of good faith and due diligence. This is really a test about what directors should know and how responsible they should be or shouldn't be for the running of the company. Now, all defendants have denied they breached any director's duties.
I mentioned this one earlier in the show, Sean. There's more bad press for WiseTech Global, with a former employee suing billionaire founder Richard White and his new wife, Zena Nasser, over workplace issues.
Comes after a high-profile legal dispute between Mr. White and a former lover last year resulted in a settlement. The claim against Mr. White Ms. Zena Nasser and the billionaire's private investment vehicle came as WiseTech confirmed it was investigating 2 confidential complaints made by an employee and a supplier against the company's founder. Nine Media is reporting that Mr. White is facing new allegations of inappropriate conduct and is yet to sign the 10-year consultancy agreement announced in October last year when he resigned as WiseTech's chief executive. Mr. White has been a little bit more public about this. On Sunday, he said in a statement he was open, trusting, generous, and as a consequence, naive to how extreme wealth changes things. Went on to say, I was certainly not prepared for the numerous attempts to extract money from me that I have received over the past 5 years from people from all walks of life, both male and female. I'm now much more guarded, sceptical, and prepared to defend myself against spurious claims.
Sean, I mentioned this story before, and I find this fascinating. Woolworths is ordering its 10,000 office-based workers to come into the workplace at least 3 days a week, following a similar mandate from Coles last year. It feels as though the return to office thing, it just keeps on building momentum.
Yes. So in a note to staff, boss Amanda Bardwell said the organisation wants to create more in-person opportunities. Slowly, Michael, corporates are cajoling, encouraging people to come into the office. Not necessarily a bad thing, but
My favourite story yesterday about this, Sean, was about the Commonwealth Bank cracking down on what is broadly called coffee badging. And it is...
Coffee badging.
Coffee badging. So essentially the requirements for Commonwealth Bank is that I think you have to spend half of your working days across the month in the office. And so I think there might be a bit of flexibility there as to how you divide it up during the week, but it's got to be half of your working days across the month. And in order for it to count as a working day spent in the office, you've got to be there for at least 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, apparently there has been an alarming increase in the number of people who turn up, sign in, and then disappear after an hour.
Wow.
And just go and work from somewhere else. Go and work from home, from a cafe, anything. And they call it coffee badging, apparently, because it is how long it takes to go and make a coffee, drink a coffee, and then do a little bit of stuff and then just go. And that's why so Commonwealth Bank is cracking down on it now because they've noticed this trend increasing. So, yes, we might be seeing more companies trying to get people back into the office. They've got to get them to stay there.
Why, if you made the effort to get to work, why not just work from there?
It's a really good point. Otherwise, you're just wasting kind of transit time,
totally.
right? Yeah,
Totally.
I'm with you.
Anyway,
aren't we diligent?
we are.
Really?
International news. Please.
Yeah, let's go. The Cook Islands, Sean, will sign a strategic agreement with China in a move that has rattled New Zealand and deepened concerns about Beijing's influence in the region.
Mark Brown, the archipelago's Prime Minister, has travelled to China for a state visit. He'll sign a comprehensive strategic partnership that will cover everything from trade and tourism to renewable energy. Now, the Cook Islands were controlled by New Zealand until the 1960s. They've got a tiny population, about 15,000 people. New Zealand still provides financial backing. Problem is, for New Zealand at least, they weren't told about it. And the Deputy Prime Minister of that country, Winston Peters, said the government was blindsided by the move and called on the Cook Islands to share the details of the agreement with New Zealand authorities as required by its constitution. Mr. Brown, he responded. He said there's no need for New Zealand to be in the room. He said the pact with China isn't related to security or policing, so it does not require a sign-off, according to the Financial Times. All that's well and good, but it does demonstrate the geopolitical diplomacy still going on in our region at the moment.
Yeah, it certainly is. Finally, Sean, the Philadelphia Eagles have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl in a game that was pretty much over by halftime. The surprise, though, Sean, was the booing of two of America's superstars.
So Donald Trump went up on the big screen. There were as many boos as there were cheers. I don't remember Donald Trump being booed very much. Well, on the big screen, in fact, what I saw, he was booed more. Now, obviously, wherever the mics were would make a difference. And if you read reports of it, people say there are as many boos as cheers. But interesting. Normally, Americans love their president. The other person who was booed, big time, Tay-Tay, Taylor Swift. Now, Travis Kelce, her boyfriend, plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. She was booed big time from all those Philadelphia Eagles fans. I reckon she wouldn't be used to that. Who's who turned up? Rupert and Locke Murdoch was there. Apple's Tim Cook. Lionel Messi, well-known American football player. Hip-hop star. I'm joking, Michael. You do know that. Did you pick me up on that? Yeah, good.
Yes. Sorry. I was sorry. Keep going. I was just thinking about what I was going to tell you in a minute. Sorry.
Right.
I do listen to you.
Adam Sandler was there. The comedian, actors John Hamm and Bradley Cooper introduced the teams. Average ticket price on resale platform StubHub, about 10,000 Aussie dollars.
Jeepers. Now, Sean, I did a bit of research for you.
Good, thank you.
So I went and watched as many of the Super Bowl ads as I could.
Good on you. I haven't done it yet.
So that I could whittle them down and just give you the ones that you have to go and watch.
Yeah.
Overall, I was a bit disappointed with this year's crop.
Right.
I know it's easy for me to be a bit of an armchair critic. I haven't spent millions of dollars in 6 months working on these things. But the two that I really enjoyed, the Coors Mondays, it's like the light Mondays beer.
Right.
And it features a sloths. It's very entertaining.
Right.
So just Google the sloth ad.
Yep.
And then the Ram ad, so Ram the car maker, featuring Glenn Powell, who is a very kind of, you wouldn't know him because he's in movies and you don't like watching movies.
No.
But he is like one of the it kind of stars at the moment. And it was actually very good.
So the sloth ad Super Bowl, Ram ad Super Bowl.
Yep, those two are my pick.
Good.
Of 2025. Sean, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. Your guest today is Chris Breike from StockSpot, all about gold and investing in gold and how much the gold price is going to rise. It is coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Tuesday, the 11th of February, 2025. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.